Hello everybody, in today's video we are going to be painting a character from the Tyranny of Dragons campaign book from Dungeons & Dragons. And who we're going to paint up here is this character right here, Pharblex Splattergoo. So if that sounds interesting to you, let's get into that video. So, just like in the intro I showed you there, I want to try and paint up Pharblex here as close as I can to his canon appearance in the Tyranny of Dragons. So, what I'm going to be doing here is going for a nice brown for his clothing and trying to match it up. Now, I'm not going to do it 100%, of course. I'm not going to sit there trying to mix paint all day to get it matched 100%. I want to get as close as I can and with the paints I have available for sort of ease and convenience. As well as that too, I know that this sculpture is slightly different from the official artwork. There's sort of details that are different, or some are added on or missing, so it's not going to be a complete one-for-one, but I want to try and get it as close as I can with the paints available, and hopefully you'll find that interesting. So as you can see here, of course, we're just coming in with some nice thin coats and building up that color for his clothing. Then once we have the base coat of his clothing painted up, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and paint the skin, of course. And since of course he's a billywog or a frogman, we want to be coming up with a nice green, and like I said, I want to go for as sort of as close as I can. Now I might end up by actually doing this a little bit darker than he is in the official artwork because he's quite bright, but I was quite enjoying the sort of darker colors on him and going with brighter highlights. So that's what I'm going to do here, so sort of separating out from the actual official artwork, because like I said, I don't want to follow it one for one. I want to take my interpretation on it a little bit, maybe change up the colors just slightly, but I want to keep everything, the big stuff, basically the same, and make it so you can easily recognize it as him, of course. Then once we have that completed, what I'm going to do now is I'm coming with some Avalon Sunset. This is of course sort of like a mustard yellow color, and I want to be doing this for his jacket that he's wearing. Now this is something that I definitely wouldn't have done. I probably wouldn't have paired up a yellow sort of jacket slash like overclothes for him, but this is one thing where the official artwork of a miniature, if you have one, can really help get you a little bit out of your comfort zone, or choose something that you wouldn't necessarily would do. So like I said here is I wouldn't have chosen this. I probably would have gone for maybe a different brown or a green, gone for a more sort of natural color, but coming in with a super bright color I think is very unique and interesting, and really does help this model stand out that little bit more, on especially on the tabletop where we've got this bright color on here. But of course, since he was designed by character designers, of course they put a little bit more emphasis on that. And one other thing too is it also gives me a lot of ease in terms of trying to come up with the paint scheme for this, as if I was to do it all by myself. I would of course, like I said, chosen some different colors, so I'm just trying to follow along here as close as I can, so it takes a little bit of weight off your shoulders. Then with that yellow jacket completed, we're going to come in with some red now. Myself, I'm using the fist in red here, and what I'm doing is I'm painting up his scarf slash sash, this over sort of covering he has on him that has these nice little runes on it that are sort of embroidered in it, and that have the draconic symbols, I believe, for the draconic language. So it probably has a nice awesome effect and gives you that little bit of extra detail, and with making it red, it really does pop out and gives you something really cool and interesting to look at, because as you can see, the colors that we've already chosen out are very contrasting against one another, and you can clearly see and define all the colors out from one another, so you can nicely and easily see the difference in the details, and you can definitely separate those parts out from one another on the tabletop when you're placing it down and you're standing back a few feet from it. Then once I had that scarf of his painted up, I'm just going to come in now with a nice simple brown, different from the brown that I used on his cloak, and I'm just going to be painting in his staff that's on his back here. Of course, he is this sort of crazy magic wielder, so we want to go with something sort of simple here, especially since he of course is a frogman. He has access to his sort of nature area of swamp, so he uses a nice branch that he's probably picked out himself to use as his magical staff. So I just want to go with some nice simple wood here, nothing too fancy, just a nice simple brown. Then this here is another thing that I wouldn't have done, but I'm glad the official artwork has there for me to reference and give it a different color to very easily differentiate and pop out with here. Because if I was painting up this, he has this nice hat, I believe, sort of like his wizard's hat, I guess, in terms of looking at it. And it's actually like a crocodile or alligator head, and the artist has actually colored it in as a blue grayish color, probably more so blue. And it's very different than what I probably would have done. I would have gone with maybe just a really bright green, or maybe even like a yellowish green to separate out. But having this blue color really does separate this piece out and really does give it that presence and something really interesting to look at over the entirety of the piece. So that's one thing that is also really cool. So like how we painted up with our yellow cloak, coming in here with this blue crocodile head as a hat is great. And doing this is taken, like I said, off a lot of that burden of coming up with colors. But also, since it's well designed, they have these great sort of complements over top of the entirety of the character. Okay, so one other thing that this miniature has on it, which is probably a little bit hard to see since we were painting up and I went with a black base coat, is he actually has this severed head at his side there. So I want to paint that up, and I'm going in with a light skin tone for this. I believe I'm started off with cobalt flesh here, which is one of the lighter skin tones I have. Not the complete brightest, because I want to come in with some highlights in the later steps to give it that more sort of dead appearance there. So something nice and simple, but also trying to make it look a little bit fleshier, and going with that super light tone to make it look like there's no blood flowing through that head. Then once we have all that complete, that pretty much completes our base coats now. So what I'm going to do is move on to some washes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to start off with a brown wash. Now I'm going to be washing pretty much over the entirety of everything except for his skin and the crocodile hat that he has on his head. I want to give everything else a wash. I also might too, just avoid the severed head there as well. I think I might go with a different color for that, but everything else otherwise is going to get a good overall wash, so we can really make sure we get it into those cracks and crevices. And of course, making sure that you keeping an eye on it as it's drying, so it's not pulling in any areas you don't want it to. Okay, so now we've had all those areas washed. What I'm going to do is come in with another wash now. This time it's going to be a blue wash, and this is going to be going on our crocodile head, or our wizard's cap for our character here. So giving that a good overall coat. One thing I do want to pay attention to, since it's at the very top of him and it's a completely different colored wash than we have underneath him, is I want to make sure I'm being a little bit more sparingly and being more controlled with that wash, so it's not going to pull down around his neck or around his face or anything like that. So one thing to be aware of if you're giving a wash to somewhere high up and it's a different color from somewhere lower down, is to just pay attention. Washes are usually pretty good. They have a good shelf life, running off point, but you just want to keep an eye on that sort of thing. Then once I have all that completely dry, I'm going to come in with my first lot of highlights now. And for this, I'm going to start with our crocodile head, and we've got that nicely done. So what I'm going to do is come back in with our original color here. Since the original color I used was a blue-gray, and giving it that blue wash is going to really come in with the highlights there and really make it stand out that lot more, since it will be tinted more towards the blue with having that blue wash on top of it. And since it's a blue grey, it'll give it that sort of higher highlight color and make it look that little bit brighter. So one little trick you can do there to make your highlights that little bit brighter looking without having to add in white or anything like that, is to just wash it with a different colored wash and then place that original color over top. Then with his hat complete there, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in and start off with where I first started off with, and that was his brown clothing. So just coming in there with that original color, since we gave it that nice deep dark brown wash, and I just want to come in and pick out those nice highlights on it. And since this model is really well sculpted, it's got these nice areas of ridges and high points that we can use for highlighting. Now that we have his clothes highlighted up, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with a highlighted skin color. This here is a lot brighter than that original cobalt flesh I used, and you can see it's a lot more white than the original color underneath, so that's what I'm trying to go for, is give it that sort of really undead appearance on there and really make it look like there's no blood at all flowing through that skin, except for those sort of deeper recesses where it's slowly coming out. So I'm giving a good overall coverage. I'm not going light on the highlights here. I'm giving it more of like a complete over painting and leaving the deepest recesses in the original color. Then once we have that face completed, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with our original Avalon sunset here, and I'm just going to be picking out the high points and the ridges on the back of his cloak, just like I did with the front of his clothing that was underneath with the brown. We're just doing the exact same thing here, being a little bit more sparingly, but also building those layers up a little bit more, since of course this is yellow. You need to use that little bit more layering there to try and build it up, since sometimes yellow can be a very thin color. Luckily Avalon Sunset actually has quite good pigmentation, so it doesn't take so long to build up. I think it helps being that little bit of a mustard color. It gives it that little bit more richness, so it's a little bit easier to paint on. Then once we have that complete, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to come in with a bright green, and this is going to be used for highlighting, of course, his skin tone. So what I've done here this time is I wanted to switch it up from how I usually do it, as I would usually put a highlight then a wash over top of it, or a wash then a highlight. But I felt that with the original color I went with his skin there, it was already dark enough, and I didn't need to come in with a wash and just darken it down some more. If I had to come in with a green wash, sort of turn it a bit more green, I think that just felt a little bit sort of redundant to me. So what I wanted to do is come straight in with the highlight. I wanted to go with a super bright highlight, so it really did contrast off the darkness of his skin. So the highlights here are a little bit bigger than normal highlights I would do, but I'm using it to sort of define the parts of the sculpt, so you can clearly see what's going on here. That's my intention anyway, to really help sell it and give it this brighter sort of appearance, that these shadows look way darker in that original color, and because our highlights are so bright, you've got nice bright highlights. So I wanted to try and see if I could use it to bring out the highlights a little bit more and sort of show off that sculpt a little bit better and just give a different effect. So that's what I was trying to go for here. But with this here completed, it means our miniature is finished. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go into those glamour shots and see how it came out, like in the end. And with all that completed, we have finally finished painting out Pharblex Splattergoo from the Tyranny of Dragons campaign from Dungeons & Dragons, and this miniature is by Gale Force 9. So I hope this video has been helpful for you guys, whether you want to follow along with what I did here, or you just want to use the video as some inspiration in painting up your own miniatures. But with all that said, guys, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I can't wait to see you all in the next video.